Good evening and welcome to the April 5th meeting of the Los Gatos Town Council. I'm starting down here tonight because we have 2 or 3 special items on our agenda that will take place down here. But first we will begin with roll call.
Councilmember Mike Wasserman.
Here.
Councilmember Steve Rice.
Here.
Councilmember Barbara Spector.
Here.
Vice Mayor Joe Pazinski.
Here.
Mayor and Chair Diane McNutt.
Here. This is a good opportunity to turn off your cell phones, your iPads if they squeak, or anything else that might be distracting. As you know, we begin each of our council meetings with the Future Leaders Program. This is an opportunity for us to identify young people in our community who are destined for greatness. And we certainly have one of those with us tonight. I'm going to tell you a little bit about him and then have him come up and help us do the Pledge of Allegiance. This is Peter Waddell, who is a junior at Los Gatos High School. He is undertaking a project to complete his Eagle Scout badge by providing access for wheelchair users to have gardens as part of Calvary Church's community garden program. You may have read about him recently in the newspaper. These accessible gardens will have crushed granite walkways leading to 6 garden plots that are strategically placed for easy access. He also plays varsity volleyball, and he's starting to explore his college options. He's currently interested in a career in zoology. So, Peter, if you'd like to come up and lead us in the pledge, please, and everyone else, please stand. Whenever you're ready.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Applause for Peter, please. Wait, Peter. We do have a little gift for you for doing this, and then the council members would like to shake your hands. That's some of the squeaking I was talking about. So next we have a 2-part presentation. Every year for the last, I think Barbara started this, so last 2 or 3 years we have proclaimed a day in the spring as Los Perros Day, when the cats go to the dogs. And Jonathan, you're going, huh? Oh, you said it right. Okay. You are going to come up and accept this proclamation, is that correct? Jonathan Knowles wears many hats in the community, and this would be your dog hat? Okay. So let me read you what the proclamation says. You may hold it up while I read from a hard copy. Whereas among companion animals, dogs are unmatched in their devotion, loyalty, and friendship, and are unequaled in their ability to understand humans, working side by side with us and sharing our lives. And whereas owning a dog is a privilege and a responsibility, requiring a long-term emotional and financial commitment and a safe environment in which to run and play. Whereas dogs are living in a majority of our households, and owning a dog encourages socialization and brings our community closer together. And whereas Los Gatos has an estimated 9,000 dogs, and if my family has its way, 9,001 as of Sunday, with access to pet-friendly stores and cafes and local organizations such as Los Gatos Unleashed, Humane Society Silicon Valley, and Society Dog that enhance the lives of dogs and human alike. And whereas the magic of the human-animal bond has the power to transform lives and should be celebrated through special recognition. Now, therefore, be it resolved, I, Diane McNutt, by the virtue of the authority vested in me as the mayor of the town of Los Gatos, do deem it appropriate and do hereby proclaim Saturday, April 10th, 2010, as the day in which Los Gatos, the town of the cats, becomes Los Perros for a day. And in conjunction with Los Perros Day, you may just stay here. You stay here. Now, switch your hats. Okay. Now Jonathan is representing the Police Foundation, and he'll tell you about why that is. We have a new member of our community to introduce. This is his first big public appearance, so the applause should be a little quiet because he's still getting used to having fans in the crowd. So if we could have Berko come forward. This is the new Los Gatos Montessorino Police Canine with Officer John Aldrich. And Jonathan, since the Police Foundation was very much involved, do you want to explain the process?
Absolutely. So I'll share that with Captain Elena Forrest here in a minute. The Los Gatos Montessorino Police Foundation is the nonprofit organization that helps to support a variety of programs here in our community, including the purchase and the training of our canine unit. As you all know, we used to have Quartz. Quartz was a hero in our town, and everyone got to know him, the kids, the adults. He passed not too long ago, and we've been trying to get a police dog ever since. And finally, 2 months ago, I went along with John as he picked up Berko at the kennel out in Menlo Park. He is from the Czech Republic. Interestingly enough, he only speaks Czech. So don't think you can stop him by saying stop and no, should you be on the receiving end. That won't work unless you also speak Czech. But you know, he's more than just an apprehension and search dog. He really is the 9,001th dog now in Los Gatos, and a community member. And we have every expectation that he too, like Quartz, will become a loved member of our community by all. But with that, I would like to invite Captain Elena Forrest to come up and talk a little bit about him from a police perspective.
So I also want to talk about John, too, because it's really important when we pick a canine handler that they're intelligent and motivated and dedicated, because it's not easy to have a partner in your car that does that all night long, or barks or whatever they might do. So John's been in law enforcement for about 4.5 years. He came to us from Los Banos Police Department a couple years ago. And we're really pleased to have John, who decided to step up to the plate and take on this role, because it really is important. And Berko is a young dog. He's about 15 months old. Again, as Jonathan said, he comes from the Czech Republic, which is a little bit different. We usually have German dogs, but as you can see, he's a beautiful dog. He's got a lot of energy. Usually dogs train about 2 years, and he passed his training in a year. So he's a really, really good dog. He's good with protection. He's got a good nose. And as you can see, he's very friendly. But he is a little excitable right now because he is a young dog, but we think he's going to be a great asset to our department and to our family, as well as John, too. So we're looking forward to Berko catching the bad guys and also but being a good community dog as well. So thank you.
And, you know, again, for John, it's a huge commitment for an officer to sign up for this kind of duty. That's why it took so long to find somebody, because Berko now is a part of John's family. John and his fiancée keep Berko 24/7 at home, just like the family pet. He has a beautiful kennel and big backyard at home, and he's just part of their family. So John, I mean, has really stepped up into doing something really special for us in the town. Now, if you want to meet Berko for yourselves, as Mayor McNutt mentioned, Los Perros Verde is Saturday. You can come down at 2 o'clock to the breezeway at Brauwauser, and Berko will be there as the mayor once again reads the proclamation, and Berko will accept the proclamation on behalf of all the perros of Los Gatos, and be around for people to say hi to him. Thank you very much, Mayor.
Thank you. And we do have a little treat for Berko, but I'm actually afraid to give it to him. So, Jonathan, if you'll do the honors.
Hey, Berko. My dog loves these.
Okay, gentle applause. Gentle applause. Okay, and council, since we're doing everything quite different tonight, I'm going to ask if we could use the mayor's prerogative of rearranging the agenda, and if we could pull consent item number 2 and deal with that right now. So I'm looking for a motion to approve consent item number 2.
So moved.
And a second. Any further discussion? All in favor? Aye. Okay, we have just approved our new poet laureate, and so it's my opportunity to introduce her to you formally. Parthenia Hicks, please come forward. Actually, you can do loud applause for Parthenia. At the request of the library board, in conjunction with the groundbreaking and opening of the new library, the town council did decide to have an official poet laureate for the town of Los Gatos. We put out a call for entries. We had 10 extraordinary poets in our community step forward to share their talent with us. Those of us who were on that selection committee had a glorious time meeting them and listening to their poems. We had a little informal reception for all of them just prior to tonight's council meeting. And this is the opportunity for the community to meet Parthenia for the first time, but it won't be the last time over the next 2 years. I'm going to tell you a little bit about her. She is a freelance writer and editor and manager of the Tree of Life bookshop at the Center for Spiritual Enlightenment. I believe you've been a town resident since '99. Is that correct? Okay. Her poetry and articles have been published in a range of magazines, newspapers, and literary journals. She's received 3 Pushcart Prize nominations for poetry and short stories, and that's the most honored literary project in America. So that's in other words, it's a big deal. She received the Ville Montalvo Poetry Prize in 1999 and the Robinson Jeffers Tor House Poetry Prize in 2007. She's given many presentations, readings, and workshops in a variety of venues, and we are looking forward to her doing all kinds of things in the community over the next 2 years, in addition to writing an original poem that she will present at the groundbreaking of the library on June 21st, and then another original poem that she will present at the grand opening of the library about 18 months later. So I wanted to give her an opportunity to say a few words. We also asked her if she would read tonight one of the poems that she read to us when we were doing the selection process that we were so impressed with. And so I will turn the microphone over to you, Parthenia.
Thank you, Mayor McNutt. Good evening, everyone. I can't tell you how happy I am to be here. And I would like to let you know that I love loud applause. I want to begin by thanking Mayor McNutt and everyone on the interviewing committee for this honor, for the gift of representing Los Gatos through the language of poetry, something that not every city is doing. I want to thank all of the other poets, and I want to say that I feel very honored to be in their company. And I hope that we become a group of poets and a group of wildly energetic poets in the city of Los Gatos. I also want to say that, to me, poetry is the soul of the community. And I feel very honored to be a part of that blooming soul of the town of Los Gatos. I'm going to read The Doves of Vasona to you. And if you are a person who frequently reads poetry, then you know exactly what to do. If you don't read poetry frequently, or you feel you've been separated from it, then I will invite you to just sit back and relax. If you're comfortable, you can close your eyes. You don't have to. But just know that the language will fall inside you. You don't need to strain. You don't need to stress. You don't need to work really hard to make sure that you understand it. Just know that it will fall inside you, and it will go and become, and you will receive exactly what you are supposed to receive from it. The Doves of Vasona. The purple-throated doves sit round and full under the girders of Highway 17, undaunted by tons of steel, rushing over their nests of nicks and knacks, sitting 2 by 2, tucked along the lips of green meadow. One slim white mother, speckled with large black spots, stands out from the smooth, soft gray. A spaniel of a dove. She eyes me warily, sizes me up, then flies to her raftered nest, lets me see the bobbing heads, their peeps and pulls. Here, she says, here, underneath the avenue of the larks, just off the freeway, we fly the same exit home to the hidden cities beneath the city, beyond county lines and subdivisions. Here, she calls, here, to the walkers and cyclists, the joggers and the hypnotized drivers, to the poets who stumble in the dark, following the symphony of the rookukoo as it bounces off the steel in the chilly, chilly night. Thank you.
So it was very difficult, but what can I say? What can I say? Excuse me. We have an official plaque for you so that everybody knows, in case there was any doubt, that Parthenia Hicks is now the official Los Gatos Poet Laureate. There you go. And unfortunately, that is the end of all of the fun stuff. So now we will get back to our regular meeting, and while I'm returning to my seat, we can have a closed session report.
Yes, the council met in closed session on March 29th for the item of town attorney appointment or recruitment, and there was no action taken.
Okay, next we have council matters. Mr. Wasserman.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. A couple of weeks ago, the Project Cornerstone organization had their annual awards banquet, and they give out six different awards that they choose. And I'm very proud to say that the town of Los Gatos won 2 of those 6 awards. Of the 6, one was for Fisher Middle School, led by Principal Lisa Frazier, and all the work that she's done, developing assets in our young people and expanding Project Cornerstone. The other was the town of Los Gatos' outreach program that reached some 70 organizations and 18,000 adults, helping to spread the word about Project Cornerstone. And as our town manager has over there, there is the award that we won. Town of Los Gatos is going to display that, I would presume, out. I'll call them in the trophy cases out there in the front. But Manager Larson, if you can hold that up and show it, it's very heavy, that tile piece. And that was made by kids and has a nice tile there in the middle. And it's kind of fun because Project Cornerstone, that's resembling the Cornerstone concept. So congratulations, Los Gatos.
Thank you, Mr. Wasserman. Other council matters? Mr. Brzezinski.
Madam Mayor, today the mayor and myself and Councilman Wasserman, along with our manager, Greg Larson, and Regina Faulkner from Community Services attended the I guess it's biannual luncheon for the Housing Trust. And at that time, we celebrated the accomplishments of the Housing Trust, of which we've been participants from the very beginning. And it was a wonderful event that allowed the community to come together to celebrate the willingness to support individuals who need housing, but perhaps without the means. And there's been great success in the course of the last several years with the Housing Trust, and I think we're all proud that Los Gatos ends in the top quartile of participants among all the cities and towns of Santa Clara County. So I just wanted to acknowledge that we were able to participate and that we continue to be supportive of the Housing Trust.
Thank you. Other council matters? I have one. I might be stealing an item from the manager, but I go first, so I can do that. Always being trendy, Los Gatos, in the current issue of Time Magazine, which of course has iPad on the cover, but that's not what I'm going to talk about, has an article called Flushed Away about the dangers of prescription medicines getting into our water supply. And it's great timing. This is the April 12th issue of Time Magazine, because on Saturday, April 17th, we will have a prescription medicine drop-off for Los Gatos and Montessorino residents. This is a free opportunity to safely dispose of all types of prescription medicines, expired, not expired, liquid, pill form, basically anything but sharps, and you bring it down to the Corporation Yard on Miles Avenue on that Saturday between 9 a.m. and 1 p.m., and it will, as I say, be safely disposed of and not end up in the landfill and not end up in our water supply. And if you really want to understand how serious this problem is, read the article in Time Magazine and think about what's in your water when you're drinking it and where those pills might have come from. So I hope you all take advantage of that if you have anything left over in your medicine cabinet. Manager matters.
Mayors and members of the council, only 2 items to report from staff. First, hot off the press is the spring edition of Vista, our annual newsletter to the community, which features a series of articles on the Adult Recreation Center program expansion, the general plan update, efforts for the library groundbreaking coming forward in June, and a variety of others, and there's advance copies for each member of the council. These will be put in the mail by the end of the week to every address in the town of Los Gatos. Second, following on the comment from the mayor about prescription drug drop-off, this is also Keep Los Gatos Beautiful Month. And every Sunday at the Farmers Market, we'll be highlighting different features and events, from mercury thermometer exchange to how the new Los Gatos Library is being designed as a green building. It's also wanted to highlight that on Thursday, April 22nd, we'll be doing an Earth Day celebration for children in front of the library with the Wild Things. It's working with displaced wildlife, not a band of some sort that we typically have on the front lawn. And then our Arbor Day celebration will conclude the month on Friday, April 30th at 10 a.m. It is also a segue to tonight's Did You Know, a new program started this year by the mayor where we try to highlight issues of interest to our community. Coming forward to the microphone is Monica Wren, who's going to share tonight's Did You Know.
Thank you. Did you know that It's a Bring Your Own Mug campaign is one that encourages residents and visitors to keep Los Gatos beautiful? That if each household in Los Gatos could decrease the number of disposable coffee cups used by 2 weekly, we could have annually 1.2 million cups would be absent from our landfills. This April, the town has partnered with many local cafes to offer discounts to patrons that bring their own mugs. Simply present your mug at the time of purchase to receive your discounts. The participating locations are all listed on the town's website, in the Los Gatos Weekly Times, and on the Keep Los Gatos Beautiful flyer. Flyers have also been distributed to the participating businesses to be placed in their windows. For more information, visit our homepage and follow the link to Keep Los Gatos Beautiful. Thank you.
Thank you. And council, if we all want to hold up our mugs So we are saying, do what we say and what we do. Mr. Larson, anything else? Okay. Next on the agenda are the consent items. So these are items that will be taken without discussion with one motion unless anyone on council wants to pull an item. Mr. Brzezinski?
I move to approve the consent calendar. We've already approved item number 2.
Wait 1 second. I need to ask if anyone wants to pull from the public.
Okay.
Anyone wants to pull? Is there anyone in the public wants to pull an item off of consent? Now I would love to have a motion to approve the consent items.
So moved.
Second. So we are approving all of the consent items on the agenda with the exception of number 2 that we just did earlier on the Poet Laureate. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
And it passes unanimously. Now we move to verbal communication. This is an opportunity for anyone in the public to speak on an item not on tonight's agenda. So if you would, please fill out one of the cards and submit it over to the clerk's staff over here on the left. I do have 2 cards. And first we have a team from West Valley Greenleaf. They're going to split their 3 minutes in a little rap song or something, I think.
Good evening, Town Council, staff. Thank you for having us. We represent West Valley Greenleaf. We are a group of concerned citizens from Montecito, Saratoga, Los Gatos, now Cupertino, and parts of San Jose. We were formed in 2007 by the vice mayors of Los Gatos, Saratoga, and Montecito, including our own Barbara Spector. Thank you very much. And we're here tonight to thank the Town Council and staff for a recent addition. So we have a gift here tonight for Mr. Craig Larson and Regina Faulkner. And I will allow Ellen to read what we have. Ellen Sweeney.
Certificate of Appreciation presented to the Town of Los Gatos Council and staff this 5th day of April 2010 in appreciation for installing recycling bins and solar trash compactors in downtown, thereby firmly demonstrating their commitment to supporting a more sustainable future. Thank you.
Passing out to the town staff and town council reusable bags. West Valley Greenleaf bags. Our slogan is "Get Your Green On." And also there's a cleanup on May 15th at Los Gatos Creek, and the coordinators are West Valley Greenleaf. So I'm going to pass out the flyers to the town council and town staff. Thank you.
You can just hand those to staff and she'll take care of it for you. Thank you so much. Mrs. Spector, I have a feeling you might like to say something.
I actually wasn't thinking about it, but whenever given this kind of opportunity, I can't pass it up. I am very proud of many things, but as I look at the West Valley Greenleaf representatives out in the audience, I want to thank you for your continuing efforts for our town and now for an even greater regional effort, and then to thank the members of the town staff that have worked with our community and with the West Valley Greenleaf members to make our town even greener and even better. So thank you, Regina, and all the rest of you very much.
Thank you. I have one other card for verbal communication, and that is from Dale Workman. Oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Workman, your agenda item number 14, I had you stuck under verbal communication, unless you had something not related to, okay. It was in the wrong slot, my mistake, I'm sorry. Is there anyone else who wants to speak under verbal communication? Seeing none, then we will close that portion of the agenda and move on to our public hearings, of which we have 3 tonight. Starting with item number 12. Do we have any desk items on any of these? Okay. Item number 12, which is adoption of a resolution continuing certain department fees, rates, and charges, and amending certain fees, rates, and charges for fiscal year 2010-11. And we'll begin with a staff report by Jenny Hayarama.
and to introduce, we don't have a desk item, we do have the slides that will be presented on the screen that are in front of the council for any notes you wish to take. This is an annual process, as Jenny will outline, that we come forward required to adopt fees 2 months before the start of the fiscal year. We normally do this meeting at the second meeting of April, but due to other council scheduling, we moved it up to the first meeting of April for your initial consideration tonight. With that, Ms. Hariyama.
Thank you, Greg. Tonight we're going to be talking about the process for the proposed 2010-11 comprehensive fee update. As Mr. Larson just stated, council approves fees annually, and our policies also require a cost recovery in order to avoid general fund subsidies. We did perform a comprehensive cost service study in April. Our last study was conducted in 2005. And the recommendation that we're going to bring before you today includes fee adjustments, both upwards and downwards, and a couple of new fees for your consideration. So we're going to start with the large phased fees. These are going to be phased in over time. These are fees that are above 10% of the current fee. They're starting in building division, and I'll name a few that have been adjusted. Building permits, for example, inspections outside of normal hours was adjusted upwards, including electrical, mechanical, and plumbing permits. We also made some adjustments in engineering. Those include engineering development review surcharge that went from 10% to 15%, and engineering plan check applications. And finally, in the police department, we had some additional adjustments, including fingerprinting services, concealed weapons permit, renewal permit, tow truck drivers permit and renewal processes were increased, and vehicle release as well. Modest increased fees were those that were adjusted no more than 10%. Those also were in the planning division. They were ANS application and PDs. Also engineering plan check for public improvements and grading, lot mergers, lot line adjustments, and hauling permits. And then in police, we had increases for solicitor's permit, massage permit, administrative fees for our special events. Our horse-drawn carriages were also increased modestly, and our false alarms. New fees included in the planning division was our news rack permit. That's basically to recoup staff costs related to the news rack ordinance for administration and enforcement. The library has a new library proctor fee. They're currently providing proctor testing services. This is currently being not charged for. We introduced this fee. It's also charged for at most educational institutions. And finally, we have a couple of new fees under administration. The first is the credit card processing fee. This was brought up under council discussion at the mid-year. We did include this for your consideration. This is to recoup our costs associated with processing credit cards. We currently have $14,000 a year that we have to pay for in credit card processing fees. The second is the business license application processing fee. It's a $25 application fee to recoup $205,000 that it takes the town to process both new business licenses and renewals. And lastly is our attorney's fees. These are for a variety of attorney fees for related legal review. And finally, we do have some fees that were reduced as a result of the study. This is because resource allocations have changed or staffing has changed. They include the system fee schedule in engineering, the inspection fee for public improvements and grading, and then finally in police we have reductions in tow truck services and permit renewals, firearm storage, and commercial false alarm registration fee also went down. That does conclude my remarks. I'd like to also advise council that staff will be available to address any specific questions that you have on departmental fees. Also in the audience tonight is our consultant, Dad Eds, with FCS Consultant Group, and he's here also to answer any very specific questions that you have on methodology.
Thank you very much. I suspect that council might have some questions, so let's open it up. Council has no questions. Mr. Wasserman? I do. You don't.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. And I do have some questions. I just wondered, in your process, did you want them after the public has spoken, before?
I think we should do all of our questions now, and then we'll open it to the public. So this would be a time for questions, not commentary. So typically, we do questions now, then open it to the public before we do our deliberation.
Okay. Questions, not commentary. All right, I will. Questions would be, there was, and I don't know if this is for staff or consultants or where, so I'll direct it through the mayor to wherever's appropriate. There were comments made in the report that referenced parity with other cities. And so I had questions as to where that report specifics were, so I could look at that, because it was referenced. I wondered where that information was. There was also discussion about the town-wide overhead, not just actual costs being put in. And with a conversation with Manager Larson, I understand that to be management, utilities, facilities, et cetera. And I was really interested in the breakdown, for instance, in the various fees, be they planning, community development, wherever. I'm fascinated by what has taken place and how this study is done, and I really, to feel comfortable, need to understand it more. And I wondered what kind of opportunity was available for council to review the analysis that took place.
Okay, Mr.
Thank you.
Larson, we have two questions on cost comparisons with other city and the methodology in terms of overhead calculation. Do you want to deal with those or assign those out to other people?
I think both questions, we could ask our consultant to come forward, first to address the methodology for the council's understanding, particularly as it relates to the overhead allocation to appropriated fees. And then we do have excerpts that the consultants have provided in terms of the comparison that I believe they'd like to introduce as well.
Sure. Well, I'm Dan Eds, and I was the consultant on the user fee side. I can address the indirect cost allocation plan as well. If I'm not addressing your question specifically, just ask me to.
Sir, could you put the microphone up just a little bit higher?
Okay.
Great, thank you.
The indirect cost allocation plan is basically a very formalized structure of assigning overhead cost to what we call direct service departments. I'll just use IT, for example. Where we take the total cost of IT and we're spreading that cost to finance, to planning, to recreation, to all the different functional departments within the town. Now, we do that in a very methodical way, and the reason we do that is because indirect cost allocation plans in general tend to mirror, or the methodology tends to mirror a methodology that's already been established by the Office of Finance and Budget, OMB, friendly called OMB A87. And it basically just establishes a methodology for assigning costs to direct service departments. So for IT, for example, we're going to be using certain numbers to assign those costs. And a typical one is, well, we assign IT cost on things like the basis of computers. So it's not just a whimsical assignment of cost, but it's based on some objective criteria. For the methodology of the user fee study, it's again a very rigorous, like a robust methodology. We're looking at staff time and the utilization of staff time. And then we're assigning costs based on fully loaded productive hourly rates that we've calculated. And I believe you also had a question about the comparison. Specific question on the comparison review?
Just through the mayor?
Please.
Thank you. Yes, it mentioned once or twice in here, it talked about parity. And it talked about Los Gatos being almost in the middle, so I'm looking at that and saying, okay, we're almost in the middle. So does that mean half the cities are more, half the cities are less? What does that mean? So I was looking for a report to see, for instance, in a plan development application where a proposal is that this fee goes up X amount of percentage, and one of the factors it says in the analysis was comparisons to other cities. I have no idea from this if our planned development expenses are higher or lower than Saratoga. And, thank you. And for myself, and I would be interested in council's comments as well, which we'll do after the public portion. But for myself, if we look at this and we compare ourselves, for instance, it says these municipalities, Saratoga, Palo Alto, Los Altos Hills, were chosen. If I look at that and I see us on the high end, or I see us on the low end, if I'm on the high end, I don't know if we're doing 3 inspections instead of 2 inspections. I don't know if it's appropriate. That's why I'm trying to understand the methodology of your analysis.
Okay.
And so you talk about comparing to other cities. If, for instance, we come in, and I'll just stick with the plan development application, our fee comes in at 2/3 of Saratoga. Is Saratoga high or are we low?
Mm-hmm.
That's one question.
Yeah.
The other part of the question is, in comparing to other cities and using, you said, assigning cost to direct service, and you talked about, for instance, IT, taking the IT budget and spreading that among all the other departments, those costs of doing business. Then I think about departments such as library, which basically generate no revenue. So then there's the cost of the librarians and the management of that. Is the cost of that management team that manages the library, is that spread among the rest of the departments, this cost?
The cost of the library's management team would stay within the library.
Okay,
So
as
it's not
compared to
going
the
to-
cost of the manager's department, which would be spread.
Yes.
And the finance department, which would be spread.
Yeah,
And the
exactly.
IT department, which would be spread.
Right.
Okay?
Right.
Then you get into parks, parks and public works. Okay? And that, I assume, would not be spread over, for instance, a plan development application. So that's why I'm trying to understand how this came about, because I see in some of these were 60, 70% of what your analysis determines as cost recovery, others were at 30, 40. Some increases are suggested at 50 to 70, some are at 10, some are at decreases. That's why I'm trying to understand how you got to your recommendation.
Okay. Well, let me see if I could, there's several questions in there, so let me see if I can kind of walk through those. With regard to the indirect cost allocation plan, that is a separate document that actually assigns the overhead costs for the manager, for finance, for IT, to all of the supported organizations within the town. So that a portion of the cost for any one of those planning applications is recovering a portion of the city manager's, the town manager's time, the finance, IT, budget, all of the different administrative units. In terms of our methodology, we looked at the process that it takes to process those applications. On the planning side, there was some data from a previous study that we looked at. We incorporated that. We then reviewed it with staff to make sure it was still appropriate. Sometimes we moved it up a little bit. Sometimes we moved it down a little bit. And so that every one of those fees fully accounts for the total cost to the town. We have checks and balances to make sure that we're not over-assigning time or under-assigning time. For example, if there was 30,000 hours of time within the planning department or the planning function, we have to account for 30,000 hours of time. I mean, if we're over, then we have a problem with our data. If we're under, we have a problem with our data. So we make sure that we're fully accounting for 100% of staff time. We also have costs in there for like customer service. Customer service is a very important function in most communities, and so there's part of that overhead cost is for customer service. On the comparison review, those are inherently difficult because what we're comparing here is the costs that we've established with a price that another community has established, and we have no real way of knowing what was the basis of establishing that price. Does Saratoga, for example, within their cost structure for their fees, does it include citywide overhead? pretty tough to tell. When was the last time they had a thorough review of those services in terms of their cost? Don't know. It is not unusual for me to come into a city or a town and find that it's been 10, 15, I've seen as many as 17 years since the last fee increase. So there's a lot of factors in there that's really difficult to compare. What I think is probably important in terms of looking at a comparison review is, what's the trend? Is the trend that the town of Los Gatos is kind of in the middle someplace? And is that okay? And I can't answer that question for you. If there was, a series of fees where, Los Gatos was just way higher than its neighbors, then I would probably say maybe something's going on. But you could also imagine that the town of Los Gatos is going to have probably a higher cost structure than some cities, some towns, because it's built into a beautiful hillside. The regulatory requirements is very different. I was just down in Campbell this afternoon, and they have very different regulatory requirements for construction and development down there than they do up here. So there's a lot of factors that go into those comparisons that are really difficult to make good apples-to-apple comparisons.
And if I may just finish, please?
Yes.
Thank you. So the question I'll throw out for you, and I'm interested in hearing council's comments later on, is if we move all these departments towards cost recovery, and first of all, I appreciate your comment about fee analysis 10 years, 15, 17 years. We did our last one 5 years ago, and we've had fee increases every single year since then. I look at this idea of getting cost recovery, and then I hear from you that you take the overhead from other departments and put that in to determine what cost recovery is. How am I misinterpreting if you got to the point of cost recovery for planning and building and it included the overhead of management and IT and everything else, I see the sales tax and the property tax that are paid for as revenue to the town of Los Gatos to pay for some of these services. And so if everything was cost recovery, theoretically paid by the applicant, that's what those monies should be going towards.
I may not be the best one to answer that question, but I will respond. I'm thinking the staff could probably respond better than I can. The idea behind a user fee is that if I'm a citizen of Los Gatos and I want to take my property and put maybe a new bedroom onto my house, I should pay for the services that I consume from the town. If I buy a 5-acre parcel and I want to somehow do something different with it, I want to develop that, then I'm going to be consuming costs directly from the town for its plan review and inspection services. And so, the idea behind cost recovery is that the town is reimbursed for the costs that I, as a private citizen, is asking for the city to expend. Now, beyond that,
if I might add, Mayor and Councilman Wasserman, most of our services are not cost recovery. Police, dispatch, parks, library, those are not in their totality fee-for-service services. Those are paid for by the general fund taxes received by the organization. The indirect cost process that our consultants use allocate overhead to those tax-supported services just as it's allocated to the fee-supported services. So overhead is not 100% on the fees. It's allocated fairly over all the services, whether they're tax-supported or fee-supported. The notion is taking the appropriate share of direct costs for fee services and their fair share of overhead, and making sure we're moving towards user payment of those costs so they're not basically being subsidized by general fund taxes. and it's trying to reduce over time that subsidy of the direct services that are typically user fee supported. The example that our consultant gave of somebody adding a bedroom to their home, if they're paying the full costs of their review and inspections, then there's no general fund subsidy. If they're only paying 75% of the full costs, then all taxpayers are supporting the review and inspection of that additional bedroom for that property owner.
Thank you. Yes, Mr. Wasserman?
Thank you. Mr. Larson, thank you for the explanation. I was just thinking back where we reduced, I guess it's a matter of choices, where we reduced, for instance, the solar fee down to a number below what cost, which is a choice of this council to do that. And so I know that was a conscious decision that we made a couple of years ago, that because we wanted to help promote, at that time we were at the higher end on the city comparison, but wanted to promote solar installations, we reduced our fee to below the actual cost to the town for that solar fee, and so we were subsidizing that, in fact. So I guess the decision for me to wrestle with this evening is looking at these fees and looking at the recession and all that we're in right now, how much subsidizing we want to do at this time and of what. And I appreciate that. Thank you very much.
Council, other questions? Mr. Rice, nothing? Vice Mayor Brzezinski?
Thank you, Mayor. Would either of you talk to the issue of the benchmarking that was done with the 4 communities, Saratoga, Los Altos, and Palo Alto? The purpose of that benchmarking again was what?
Basically to provide the council with a sense of where your costs are in comparison to the prices that other communities are charging for similar services.
All right, so on your page 20 of the user fee study, it seems to me that when you did that benchmarking, the fees were all over the board. I mean, there was no consistency whatsoever in any of the communities chosen.
Actually, as amazing as it is, that's pretty standard.
Yeah. I guess the question then is, for our purposes, what were we to glean from the fact that you did this benchmarking?
That's a very good question. I asked myself that quite a bit. For the very observation that you just made is that the numbers are all over the map.
Yeah.
And with planning fees especially, that's it's just almost standard that you almost get a blizzard of numbers, and it's like, what do they mean? And it's very difficult to tell exactly what they do mean, for the very reasons that I outlined previously. Mountain View, for example, I think Mountain View is on there.
No, not on this selection.
It's not? Okay, no. Well, they were in the newspaper, I think.
Yeah, this morning.
This morning, so I'll use them. I did Mountain View's cost calculations about 5 years ago. So are we comparing costs as of today at this moment in time with costs as they were 5 years ago? And if we were comparing Mountain Views, that would have been the case. Saratoga, Los Altos Hills, other ones, we don't know when or if they have ever had a thorough study done on what their costs really are. I've walked into many communities and found out that the last increase in fees was 10 years ago. And 10 years ago, well, we took an average of the 5 cities around us. And that was our calculations, how we did our fee calculations.
If I might, Madam Mayor?
Yes.
When I looked at the comparative sheet, assuming that the data is all over the board, we were far and away the most expensive fee schedule of the other 4 comparative communities. There was only one deviation from that, and that was in plan development, where Los Altos ended up above us, as did Palo Alto. and then Saratoga and Los Altos Hills apparently either don't do plan developments or don't charge fees for them. But everything else, we were ahead of the curve here. Now, these are the current fees, correct, that were reflected? These are not the projected increased or enhanced fees that we're discussing
Those
tonight?
are I believe those are the costs as we calculated them.
I mean, I'm sorry, the comparison is current, correct, okay. Then I have a question for the manager. We are saying 5 years was the last time we did our full fee enhancement, and then we have done some revisions every year, as I recall. And I guess I need to know the context. Since so many of the fees, there are some fees that have been reduced in the proposal, but so many of the fees are increases based on the percentage of cost recovery right now. What drove us to this point? There's some new information that was gleaned, that was gathered, that demonstrated that we really have not been effective in the fees that we increased in the course of the last 5 years, and if so, what triggered the new response to this?
The last fee study done in 2005 resulted in approximately an 82% cost recovery. We were not up to full cost recovery. Last year, in the adoption of the budget for the current fiscal year, we proposed the implementation of a comprehensive fee study. It would have been 5 years. It was time to do it again. I wanted to incorporate the indirect cost allocation rate we used in San Jose and other jurisdictions. It's a common methodology for allocating overhead rate. It wasn't clear to me that that had been looked at all in the intervening 5 years. And the specific data point that brought me to that concern and why we recommended this fee study be done this year in last year's budget proposal to you was that when we looked at the Community Development Department fees, which if there's any department which moves towards full cost recovery, it's typically your Community Development Department. And when you're not even covering the full direct operating costs, you're not clearly covering any of the associated overhead. And that was what led to that being part of our recommendation to you last spring and to this study that we've conducted in consult with Campbell. This was actually a joint fee study done by the City of Campbell and the Town of Los Gatos jointly just to save money, basically, on our consultant charges. And they're going through the same review at this time. And in terms of what we handed out tonight for you, the excerpt from the comparison study, the sample of a building permit and plan check fees for a 3,500 square foot home with a 500 square foot garage, which included the best we could determine from other jurisdictions, all of the fees. Palo Alto is basically 40% higher than us, and Los Altos Hills is 40% lower than us. It is a broad spread. We're not at either end. And then when you look at the specific fee bases, and again, I wanted to clarify, these are not proposed fees, these are direct costs. And for most of our fees, as we've outlined in the report we gave you, we're at about 48 to 56% cost recovery, and we're recommending moving up that scale when you add in the full cost allocation.
Anything else, Vice Mayor?
And so the last question then is, with tonight's proposal, and perhaps it's already been stated in the document, but to reiterate, where will this bring us in terms of gross cost recovery?
Oh, in terms of an average percentage, we haven't tried to calculate that back. Would you have a gut estimate, Jenny? You're closer to these than...
Maybe an additional 25%.
Okay. But nowhere close to we said 82 about 5 years ago, correct? Isn't that where
was
we
correct.
ended up? Correct.
And it's about 56% that we're recovering right now.
Okay, close but not exactly there.
Right.
So it would end us up basically the same. 56 and 25 takes you to 81.
Okay, thank you.
Mrs. Spector?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. couple questions on this comprehensive user fee study, page 20, that we just received as a desk item. I just wanted to make sure that I was understanding what you were saying. With regard to the jurisdictions delineated here, Saratoga, Los Altos Hills, Los Altos, and Palo Alto, the numbers that you have for each of those jurisdictions, that's their cost. Is that their fee? That's their fee.
That's their fee.
That's their fee. All right. Do we know whether or not any of those jurisdictions have evaluated their fees in the past X number of years?
No.
So we have no idea whether they are recovering or not. Okay. And then the
or
other.
Even if they know, even if they have a policy for cost recovery.
All right. And that's fine. Thank you.
Those were big, difficult questions, so I have some simpler questions for you, just some real basic things. I noticed there was a whole section of fees related to the neighborhood center and use of the neighborhood center, and since we have leased out that facility to the Recreation Department to run, I was curious as to why we are retaining those in there, unless it's just to be a guideline for what we expect them to be charging, although it's really not up to us. That was actually a question. It's not up to us? Okay.
In the lease agreement with the Los Gatos Saratoga Recreation Department, their fees are to mimic the town fee schedule for a period of time, and I was looking to see if Regina was still here. I can't remember if that's a 2-year or 3-year window. I think it's still, we vacate the premises was the time frame we set. So that's roughly 2 years, 2 to 3 years. And then they adjust the fees as they warrant in consultation with the town. So if the town were to retain operation of the ARC, this is the fee approach we would have used. In general, we're not recommending any changes of any significance to our parks and facility recreation fees. We did not feel, based on past council action and direction, most notably last year when we brought a series of fees to you for your consideration, that further adjustments to those fees were warranted at this time. And so we are not proposing any significant changes there.
Okay. Second question, and this isn't a big money question, but it has to do with library fines for children's books. And as I'm reading what's proposed, that instead of the children being fined for overdue books on a per day or per week basis, the way I'm reading it is there's no fine for them to have an overdue book for 6 weeks, and then it's a $5 flat fee. And I was curious as to what the thinking is behind that, because it would seem to me to encourage children to keep their books for 6 weeks, or at least it would encourage me to keep my book for 6 weeks beyond the due date, and that takes those books out of circulation. And
there's actual national data that indicates that fines actually have no influence whatsoever on return dates, and this policy is an exact copy of our neighbors in Saratoga, and they report the same thing, that they'd have no trouble having children's material returned on time.
Interesting. Okay, just curious. Third small question. I was wondering, under police, why bingo is being dropped as a fee or license, because it actually just came up in a conversation in the last couple of weeks if someone was asking me about starting a bingo operation as a fundraising activity for a nonprofit. Not sure it's something we would do, but just wondering why we were taking it away.
Because we really don't have that many applications for those types of activities, and so we tried to take fees out that we rarely ever see. And so even though there may have been one recent, it just doesn't happen that often.
Okay. And then my last question, which is a little bit more complex, this is regarding the $25 handling fee for a business license. And what I'm not understanding about that is, what is it about applying for or renewing your business license transaction every year that makes it more different than any other transaction that an individual or a business would have with the town. So as a resident of a restricted parking area, I have to get a permit every year. So there's time involved in that, or someone getting a permit to put in a new water heater. I mean, all of those are individual transactions that require staff time, which would seem to me to be covered by the general fund, which is where business licenses and all those other ones go. So I'm not understanding what it is about those transactions that would warrant an extra $25 fee.
Using the building permit as an example, when the applicant comes in, or the resident or a business or a property owner comes in for a building permit, the cost of issuing the building permit is incorporated in the cost study of doing the permit review, the plan check, and ultimately the inspections. That's all part of the fee that's being charged to the applicant for a building permit. For the business license, that's actually a tax. It's a general fund tax revenue, and it is not allocated based at all on any cost of the business. It's simply a tax on business operations in the town. The fee is the cost for handling that business license renewal. That is not necessarily a general fund activity. This is a new proposed fee for the town of Los Gatos that has been adopted by several other jurisdictions, some of which are listed in the report, and we've done some additional information research on that as well and can share with you. So to try to say it more succinctly, the cost of processing the building permit fee and the acceptance of funds is included in the building permit fee analysis. Since the business license is not a fee, it's a tax, there is no similar cost allocation for the business license collection.
I'll stop on that subject right now, but we'll continue that discussion later. Mrs. Spector?
Thank you. Since you raised the issue.
Thank you.
That fee, the $25 for each business license, did give me pause. And I did talk to the town manager about it. Because I was thinking, well, if I'm operating a business out of my home, or if I'm a mom and pop operation, I'm paying the same as some huge corporation that may exist in Los Gatos. So first of all, the town manager said, yes, that's true. And then I said, well, are we doing that because the amount of time the town spends is the same whether I'm a huge corporation or I'm this little business? And he said, yes, that's the reason. Even though I understand logically what is being said and why the proposal is as it is, it doesn't quite sit right.
Do we have any other questions by council right now? Otherwise, I will open it to the public. Thank you, sir. You can be seated. We have a massive number of one card, so if there's anyone else who wants to speak on this, please turn your card in. Otherwise, Jonathan Knowles.
Madam Mayor, council members, I'm doing a wide range of representation here tonight. I'm here now to speak as a member, a commissioner on the Arts and Culture Commission, and as the chairman of Los Gatos Music and Arts here in town. It was said earlier by Rita Baum during the Poet Laureate reception we had earlier this evening that we're a town of potters and painters, and now we're a town of potters, painters, and poets. And it occurred to me that really we're a town of potters, painters, poets, and pipers as well, because we do have a lot of different music and literary and visual arts programs in our town. We have to acknowledge that it's an important part of what makes Los Gatos so very special. And this has been true for a long, long time. I know that many of you participate actively in the various arts programs that we have here in our community. And I am here tonight to ask you to please consider a percentage for the arts fee of some kind to help make sure that 100 years from now that this is all still true, that the arts continue to be important here in Los Gatos, the wide range of programs that we imagine for our town. And if, in the spirit of comparisons with other cities, as Councilmember Wasserman spoke here earlier, I think you'll find that many other communities that are similar to Los Gatos do just that to help facilitate the arts within those communities. So please keep that in mind as you consider all these things that are before you. Thank you so much, and I'm going to continue to watch the council meeting on my little device here as I go. Thank you.
Thank you. No questions. Thank you so. Any other comments from the public? Then I will close the public hearing, and now we can go back to our discussion. We can have commentary and deliberations. So I will pick up where Mrs. Spector left off. That, you know, obviously I'm uncomfortable with this handling fee. It just feels offensive to me to say to someone, whether you call it a fee or tax, give us money for the privilege of doing your business in town, and then we're going to charge you an extra fee for handling that paperwork. It just feels very bureaucratic and unpleasant to me. But that's just my 2 cents. So other comments or statements from council, or if you're ready, we do have an action item tonight if you want. Mr. Wasserman?
Thank you. No, I'm not ready. I certainly echo what was said about the business license processing fee. As I went through the various things, I put no's and yeses and question marks and the likes. One thing I wanted to express that did concern me, 5 years ago we did a fee analysis, and each year since then we've had some increases in fees. Various departments, mostly ups, some ups and some downs, but mostly ups. And so each year we've been doing that since we reevaluated things 5 years ago, and I didn't quite write it down, but Councilmember Spector was talking to Manager Larson, and it was about that we were at 82%, somewhere around there 5 years ago, and now, Ms. Harayama, I think you might have said 56%, if I'm recalling. I didn't write them down, but I think that's what I remember saying. So one question I throw out there for council discussion is that 5 years ago we did a fee analysis. We're at 82% of cost recovery. We've done some increases each of the last 5 years. We're now at 56% of cost recovery. That concerns me about what it says to the escalation of our costs. I would hope each year, if we go up a little bit each year, that we would have held in there at the 80%. I don't know, for instance, if the analysis we did 5 years ago was the same procedure and methodology that we're doing now. You know, did we compare things 5 years ago as we're comparing them now? Was 82% then equivalent to 56 now? And if that's the case, and we were 80% of cost recovery 5 years ago, and each year we've increased costs, and now we're at 56%, I think we have another problem that needs to be looked at. That's number one. Number two, I brought it up before, and that was where council in its prerogative chose to make a solar exception. And I would suggest the fact that we're, this last year, given the recession, code enforcement, we've made exceptions on that regarding banners and A-frames and said, okay, these are tough times. I know the last 4 to 5 years, we've put money into our account, a rainy day account, economic uncertainty, for uncertain times like this, to subsidize revenue deficiencies. And I would suggest to council that perhaps this is one of those times when some subsidizing should happen as compared to increasing, and Mayor McNutt was dealing with this a minute ago, fees, permits, and licenses and taxes. They were called a bunch of different things. But at the end of the day, it's an additional cost of doing business. Captain Forrest mentioned, I forget what it was in response to, but you said they were so infrequent that we got bingo. No, it wasn't bingo. It was something, was it bingo? Bingo, anyway, that you did away with the fee because the occurrence was so infrequent you chose to get them off the books. And then I look on page 3 of the staff report at the item number 1 at the top, inspecting outside normal businesses, and it says this occurs infrequently, and the proposal is to raise the fee 50%. And I look at the second one where it says additional plan review, down the third one, application for the appeals building review. This request for review by the Building Boards of Appeals is rare, and we're looking to increase it 50%. And so I'm having some troubles with some consistencies. I'm having trouble with comparing this review now, the methodology, to 5 years ago. If we were comparing, Madam Mayor, through you, did we use the same company? Was it done the same way 5 years ago? I don't recall.
Well, I actually was going to suggest that staff respond to your two concerns, unless you have a third.
Solar reception boom. Oh, third, thank you very much. Third was the figure 19 on page 20 of the comprehensive user fee study, and I echo what Vice Mayor Prusinski was touching on earlier. I look at the conditional use permit, and obviously you can compare it to any number of cities. And as you said, you don't know how long ago Saratoga, Los Altos Hills, and the others did their fee analysis, and even if it was last year, how, in fact, they did their fee analysis. But at the end of the day, the conditional use permit of Los Gatos compared to these 4 other cities is the highest. The architectural site fee is the highest. The subdivision fee is the highest. And yet on page 3, we talk about increasing our A&S fee, and on this matrix, we're already the highest. So I've got a number of questions and concerns.
Thank you. Mr. Larson, do you want to answer, especially on the target numbers for cost recovery previously and currently, and also on the rare occurrences situations and any of the other ones, but those are the 2 that I thought needed an immediate response from staff?
Okay. First, the consultant that did the study 5 years ago was PRM, who has since been acquired by another firm that did not bid when we went out for this consultant study. So having the direct longitudinal comparison from 2005 to 2010 wasn't possible. As part of the scope of contract that we went out for, we did not ask for a comparison between the 2 studies from 2005 to 2010. It appears, reading the staff report from 2005, that the prior study also included an indirect cost allocation model, which is the norm and standard when you do a comprehensive fee study. In 2 of the communities I've worked for previously, it was the methodology used. So it is a normal process to do so. The 2005 study did appear to be focused primarily on community development fees, planning and building, but it did review other services. We, again, as part of this contract, did not go back to critique the prior 2005 action. We went forward with a direct cost analysis and a fare-based overhead allocation process based on current costs for the town. Since 2005, we have reduced staffing, and as the council is full aware, last year compared to this year, we've reduced costs and we've reduced staffing, but there have been increases in salaries and benefits and other costs that the town has incurred in that time as well. In terms of the 82% that was referenced in 2005 and the 56% that's referenced now, my assumption is, but we don't have hard data to back it up, so I want to caveat my assumption, is a large part of that difference is the overhead cost allocation process that was used back then compared to the one used now. But again, that is an assumption. In terms of the rare fees, all the departments did review the fees and the costs that, reviewed the costs that came from the study and the fees that would lead to if moving to 100% cost recovery, and then made changes back based on that. The library change on the kid book overdue was based not simply on a cost recovery mechanism, but a comparison to other jurisdictions. The bingo permit fee was due to not receiving them. I'm not sure how many you had in the last year, if any. Yeah, so that's where departmental advice came in on what made sense for the fee structure as well as the viability of increases. Then in general, what finance and the manager's office did is where there was any increases that seemed extraordinary, we tried to phase them in rather than move to them directly, knowing that each year we'd be coming back to the council in April for a review of whether you wanted to do the next step increase or not.
Thank you. Council? We have options before us this evening. We can do a motion. We can continue the discussion. Vice Mayor Brzezinski?
I'd like to ask another question. And I know we have already discussed it, but to this page 20 of the fee study, and there seemed to be some confusion, as was pointed out. This was a fee comparison; it wasn't a cost comparison. But to try to understand exactly what the meaning is of this comparison, I guess I would say either these other comparative cities, same demographics basically, are coming way under cost recovery, or our expenses are way over what most of these comparable cities have as their costs. And that I don't think we have any data on at this point in time. You indicated, Mr. Manager, that it's the increased benefits and salaries that may accommodate or may account for some of this, but cannot. We have not increased benefits and salaries in those percentages by any means in the last 5 years. So the alternative was then that somehow the overhead cost analysis done in 2005 was done with the methodology, even though it supposedly was imitative of this, perhaps was deficient as an explanation. Again, we have nothing to support that. But I guess the thing that occurs to me then is that we are looking at some very significant increases in our fees in the proposal. And I think that's what stood out to me, is ordinarily, as we've done constant fee increases over the last 5 years, they've been in increments that seemed very palatable. But this proposal, in, I would say, almost the majority of cases, certainly not all, but in a great number of the cases, the percentage increases are very large, and I think that it causes me to question whether or not we may be looking at consequences that we haven't anticipated. What happens when someone wants to come and develop in this community? If our costs for development are a great deal more significant than the neighboring cities with similar demographics, then we may not have that development take place. I think that in terms of some of the other fees, I would like us to do some analysis, or at least some dialogue about what might be the consequence for this fee of the $25 processing increment for business licenses. What does that say? I don't think $25 is a lot of money, but I think that we have to be careful about our marketplace and what the message is to the market and when we do fee increase. And I would hate it to appear as if we're attempting to balance our budget on the back of a fee enhancement, particularly when some of those fees in the planning specifically seem to be not only at this point but probably projected with the new structure to be beyond, way beyond some of our neighboring cities or comparable cities. And I guess the last question I have, Madam Mayor, is in the course of our analysis, have we looked at what the potential gain is to our net financial benefit would be as a result of this? Because I think that would be something that we would want to take a look at as well. We may be very concerned about what looks to be significant increases, and yet when you're talking about some fees for services that are seldom provided, the net gain may be very minimal. And I think that that's a question that probably we should attempt to address as well.
So a question in general to council, before I call on Mrs. Spector, is to keep in the back of your mind whether or not you think that the really thoughtful questions and concerns that we are expressing is something that can be talked through tonight and a decision made, or whether we might be getting to a point where we are giving direction to staff for some areas we want them to explore further, and we continue this to the next meeting. So I think at some point we need to figure out, are we going to work this through tonight, or is there enough there that we are going to want to continue it? Mrs. Spector, did you have your hand raised?
Yes, I did. Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'll try and answer your first question, your question first, and then get into the concerns I have. My thought right now is that the council is going to need additional information. I doubt that we're going to be able to put all these issues together in the form of a motion. My thought is that staff might have to take a look, if we go this route, at our tape and see the issues that have been raised, because you have all raised very good issues. A lot of the issues that the Vice Mayor was currently addressing are indeed unanswered questions. I go back to, and some of these things may be relevant, they may not be, but I go back, for example, to page 20 of the comparison chart of the fees. And yes, one can look at those fees and say, well, Los Gatos is too high, higher than most, but we really don't know how updated those other fees are. We don't know if those are jurisdictions that balance their budget every year, as Los Gatos does, or if they're willing to operate at a deficiency. If it's a jurisdiction that doesn't balance its budget, then I look at its low fees a little differently than I would if they were a jurisdiction that balanced its budget. Another thing, again, as I listen to everything that the council is saying and that staff is saying, I go back to page 3 of our staff report and looking at the planning division fees, because as everyone is saying, that's where a lot of the increases have been. But I see A&S going up 5 to 8%, PDs going up 10%, A&S going down. So I'm thinking, well, is that really bad? Is that really off kilter? And the answer to that is, at this juncture, I don't know. I'm getting input that pulls me either way. So at this juncture, unless somebody over here to my left, one of these 4 people, has some brilliant motion to make, I think I need more information.
And before I call on Mr. Rice, maybe Mr. Larson can be thinking about what he wants to say to structure the remainder of the conversation that would be useful for staff if we look like we're going in the direction of continuing this to a future meeting. But maybe Mr. Rice has that brilliant motion that Mrs. Spector was just talking about.
Oh, that I did, but I don't.
Okay.
I think I'm headed the same direction, that we're going to need a lot more information. Councilman Spector's hit on the surface of where I was going to go with this page 20 of the report, which tells me actually nothing. Because while all cities have to balance their budget, I want to know how these other cities are doing it. Are they doing it with multiple furlough days? Are they doing it with layoffs? Long before I came on the council, the council, I believe, wisely set a path of, we want to do cost recovery. I think that's a prudent way of doing things. Even in times of economic uncertainty, I'm somewhat swayed by Councilman Wasserman's, is this now the time to subsidize, but not enough that I'm ready to walk away from a longstanding policy that we've got to recover our costs for doing these kinds of works, because you have to look at what is the primary role of this body and that is to provide for the public safety and such for our citizens. And recovering the costs of development is, to me, reasonable. So I think that there's a lot more information that we need to get before we can go forward on this. It looks to me, as I read through it, that in general, community development seems to be closer to cost recovery than some of the other stuff because it was most recently looked at. But unfortunately, the comparison to other cities really doesn't help me because I don't know enough about how they got to where they got to. And I'll make one last comment. On the figure 18 on the page 19, where our fees for a 3,500 square foot house are just slightly below the median, I don't see our fees or the proposed increase in fees being a deterrent for somebody that wants to build a 3,500 square foot house with a 500 square foot garage. $8,000 in fees to me is not going to stop. If it goes to $10,000, it's not going to stop somebody from building a home in Los Gatos. So I think we've got some room to make some adjustments here, but we just need more information before we make those kinds of decisions.
Mr. Larson, what else can we say to you during discussion that would be helpful?
Mostly, I'm trying to think through the staff work that we can bring back to council for your next meeting, because to be incorporated in the adopted budget to be effective July, fees have to be adopted in April because of the 60-day window for them to go into effect at the start of the fiscal year. So trying to think forward to your next meeting, which fortunately is a relatively light meeting pending a commission retreat, I'd break the proposed fee adjustments into 4 areas. One, where we're proposing to reduce the fees, staff will be bringing that forward as a separate actionable item on the meeting of the 19th, because I think legally, given the data we now have, we have no choice but to reduce those fees because we're prohibited by law from charging more than the actual cost of service delivery. So for those half dozen fees that were identified, we can bring that forward as a single action item. Second, for the fees less than a 10% increase, I would probably recommend bringing that forward as a single actionable item. For the balance of the fees that had a greater than a 10% increase or that we are recommending phasing in over time, I would likely try to provide additional information as requested by the council through your commentary and reviewing the tape to make sure we've caught all that, with an alternative to present to the council of increasing any of those fees up to 10%. So if you're not comfortable with whatever was proposed in the staff report, you're given an alternative of 0 or some number 10 or less as an alternative for that fee. The last area of fees are the new fees, and I think where you could help focus the staff's work over the next week, which is all the time we have to prepare your next report for action on April 19th, is if there are any of those you are not willing to consider, I'd prefer not to spend staff time in the next week working on that. So if you could rule out any now that you're not willing to consider of those half dozen new fees, that would help focus staff effort.
And Mr. Larson, I've got too many pieces of paper here. Can you help me remember, is there one piece of paper that just lists all of the new fees? Because I think they're mixed in by department in the staff report.
On the second to last slide. So if there's anything council's not comfortable with, that would be helpful, so we're not spending, if you know you're not going to be willing to consider these.
Well, and you already have my comments regarding the business license application processing fee.
So either a consensus of the council or a motion that no further staff work be done at this time on the business license application, or to reduce it to $10 or whatever the council's will.
I'll make that motion, Madam Mayor.
Which one? He gave you 2 options.
I don't think that one should be considered.
Okay. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, that one's out. We have any other concerns about any of the other new fees or any reason for any further discussion? Mr. Wasserman?
Thank you. I appreciate what the manager's trying to do in dividing up the lower fees and 10% and below and all the rest. But what I'm having trouble comprehending, and you kind of mentioned it before, and you said you don't know, and it's a wise man that can say when he doesn't know. I appreciate that. Is 5 years ago, we were at 82% cost recovery. We've had annual increases every year. Now we're at 56%. Inflation has been basically zero. We talked about additional costs. I believe in what, is it Mr. Etz? Mr. Etz had mentioned earlier, or Mr. Larson did, there's certain costs that are not included in that overhead. For instance, library. I don't believe police is included. Is that correct?
Correct. The direct service departments are not part of the overhead.
Okay, so that gives more, Mr. Larson, that causes me to be more confused. And the reason being is, if we were at 82% here, and we've had some annual increases, and we're at 56% here, and we talked about the additional cost of payroll or whatever, the increased costs in police the last few years is not even part of that factor. And so I'm trying to figure out, are we simply analyzing what our actual cost is now differently than 5 years ago? Is it apples to oranges? Or have our costs escalated so much in the last 5 years, even with annual increases, excluding certain payrolls, that we've got a different problem? And I, for one, Madam Mayor, would like to know how we're comparing. Because 3%, 5%, 8%, the manager suggested under 10%. I'm thinking under 5%. I'm looking at inflation being zip. I'm looking at trying to encourage businesses to start and grow, certainly not encouraging them to move to other cities, as I believe Mr. Prudzinski brought up. So I've got a different fundamental problem than going through here and saying, credit card processing fee, yes, I like that one. Business licensing fee, no, I don't like that one. I happen to agree with you on 6 weeks for returning a book seems long, and if the fee doesn't make a difference, why not shorten the time? But I don't know. The better way perhaps is Mr. Larson's way. The lower fees we're not allowed to, so that's got to go through. I would suggest the next group be at 5% and below. Mr. Larson made reference to the phasing in of the higher percentage recommendations. And I look at page 3 with the inspection outside and the additional plan review and the application for appeals, all ranging between 50 and 70%. And I don't see that as far as a phase-in. Perhaps I'm missing that, Madam Mayor, but that was discussed that the larger increases be phased in. Those are the 3 biggest ones, and I don't see that. I'm uncomfortable going down the list.
I understand. And it wasn't my intention to go down any list except just to look at the new fees because they were mixed in the staff report, and I just wanted to see it in a real crisp list. But I would suggest that we, unless staff overrules me here, that you not try to tackle any more tonight the explanation as to how we got to this point, but that you regroup and create a public education piece that would start this agenda item for us the next time, that may be using some graphics or a fresh set of words that you've had time to think about would help us all better understand the process, because I feel like we're a little bit stuck in a little spinning wheel here. However, I do think that we should discuss tonight on the 4 segments that you talk about bringing forward, whether or not we are comfortable with the below 10% and above 10%, or as Mr. Wasserman was just saying, if he's more comfortable with 5 or 8, or, I mean, I have no idea. So if we can just discuss that as council on that 10%, is that a good flip-flop area here? Mrs. Spector.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. This is probably not the answer you're going to want, but for me, bringing back something that says, or these are the easy ones, these are the less than 5%. So I look at those and I go, okay, well, I can go with that because it's less than 5%. Or I'm not going to go with that because they're more than 10%. Quite frankly, that's not how I would approach the issue. It could be an issue that's less than 5%, and I don't think that the study warrants it. I don't think that comparisons warrant it, or vice versa. There may be an expense that's greater than 10% increase, and by virtue of the information we receive, it may be very reasonable. So in my mind, if staff brings it back in less than 5%, less than 1%, more than 10%, I think that would be additional good information, but it would not be the basis that upon which I would make my decisions.
Other council comments, questions, directions, or confusion? Mr. Rice?
I'd probably split it. I'd do one at 5 and then another one at 10. I think I could be comfortable there. Short.
Okay. Vice Mayor Brzezinski?
And I would like to have some, first of all, I'm going to take the packet home because it has, I think, all the data that we need to review. And in the context of what we've discussed tonight, I would like some, the mayor described it as a kind of a public education period. I would like some discussion because of the wisdom of the staff, the capability of the staff. I think it would be to our benefit to hear your perception of some of those more global issues that we've requested information on, such as what we project as the impacts of increased fees on our publics and their ability to actually access our services. What would be the impacts, for example, from the community development if we have even a higher costs for development? What would be the impacts on the business community? I know we're going to not include the discussion on the $25 business license fee, or use the fee for business licenses. But I do think that at this point in time, it is important for us to have that discussion, to see what are we really trying to do. If what we're really trying to do is go with our policy, which is cost recovery, then we should direct toward that. If our purposes are primarily driven by the budget shortfalls we're projecting for this next fiscal year, and that is perhaps the meta message behind a lot of this, then I would like to know what impacts we think it's going to have on the budget. Is it going to be beneficial? As you said, we have to get these in place before the end of April if we're going to move this into next year's budget. I would also like us to make some comment about just how we are going to move forward in a graduated way if we choose to go there. What would be a projection of this gradation of fee increases? Because I think one of the values of the last 5 years is that we had a revision, and then we had a kind of a normal increase over each fiscal year, which made it much more palatable to those who had to pay the fee. It's almost like you don't really realize that things are going up, because it's well within a kind of a range that seems realistic. It's always more difficult to move ahead in a jump than it is to move ahead in a step. So perhaps some projection of how that would look, even though we've said it, how could we gradate that over a period of time that would be beneficial to us?
Mr. Martello, do we need a motion to continue this item, or just consensus?
I think I'll look to the city manager that you prefer to keep this continue to a date certain, so noticing will stay. So that would be a motion to continue to April 19th.
I believe that would be the best approach, since fee approval actually requires a public hearing, and while we've had the public hearing tonight, the council may wish to reopen that based on new information that comes forward on the 19th. So
Especially if we
continuing
get
would be the
coverage, we might get some more people interested in this, yeah.
Oh, boy. And just to make sure I'm capturing not all the discrete points on each fee, but just the meta message, open up with kind of a review of the prior study compared to this one, a methodological explanation, hopefully as simple as possible, on how we do the indirect cost allocation and lead that to the fees, how the fee recovery basis leads then to the proposed fees, and then some categorization of the fees that staff will present based on the comment, using some tiering, 5%, 10%, as well as a flagging of the substantive issues behind the fee increases, knowing that staff has given you its recommendation based on the analysis of every department, our consultants, and our finance staff. We will go back and revisit those recommendations to see where adjustments might be possible.
So a motion would be pleasant right now?
Madam Mayor, I would move to continue this to a date certain, which would be our next council meeting on April 19.
Second.
Thank you. Any further discussion?
Madam Chair has a question.
And Madam Mayor, if I can make one follow-on comment. The one question I'll need to talk with council about is fees are not changed or adopted as budget strategies. They're based on the costs of providing the service. So we've not done the calculus that the Vice Mayor asked for in terms of what's the general fund impact. We've been working on the hypothesis of the council's prior direction, which was we're to move fees towards cost recovery so that, except in selected circumstances such as solar permits, we're not using increasingly scarce general fund dollars where we're having to make a lot of cuts already to subsidize fee-for-service operations. And the more we choose to subsidize fee-for-service operations means more cuts in the general fund operations, and it's a finite pot.
Okay, so we have a motion before us to continue this item until April 19th. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Motion passes unanimously. And if that weren't fun enough, we now move to agenda item number 13 on traffic and road impact fee ordinances.
And Madam Mayor, if I can lead off on this, given the prior discussion, and what staff would like to do is just simply introduce this issue for some background education for the council. We're not on the same clock on this as we are for the operating budget. So basically with this opening, I kind of rescind the staff recommendation that's in front of you and lay forward for you a presentation that I'll be asking our consultants to make on how we got to this point. I just, as Hill mentioned in his opening comments, I do want to highlight that this one's more difficult than the prior fee you just considered, and that we haven't adjusted this fee since 1994. So we have 16 years or so of catch-up to do. Our approach to that was to try to phase it in over a 6-year window, knowing we could bring back to the council each year or periodically, every 2 years, 3 years, your choice, a chance to revisit where we are. Is it right to keep moving up towards the full cost recovery or not, and bring that back for you to you then. We also are proposing a change in basis for calculating the traffic mitigation fee, which that's particularly why I want the consultant to present to you. Plus, Jenny has done some additional research on how additional jurisdictions are moving to the peak daily trip approach over the average daily trip as a better metric of traffic capacity demand and improvements needed. So we'll start that discussion tonight, not expecting any action, and we'll probably look forward to bringing it back to you in a 2-month window or based on your comments and discussions. Last, something our consultant wouldn't know, you will likely see in the proposed budget in the CIP a couple of significant road projects in the town that are being paid for by the traffic mitigation fee. The money does lead to direct services and benefits to the residents and businesses of Los Gatos, and that's the only reason we're addressing this issue with you tonight, is we have no other funding stream to pay for significant street and road improvements in our community except past council policy of using excess general fund revenues and traffic mitigation fees. So that's what brought this forward as a high priority from staff, is the community's continuing interest for greater road improvements. So with that, I turn it over to another member of our consulting team to give you an introduction on this item.
Good evening. Madam Mayor, members of the council, my name is Don Gaynor. I'm with FCS Group. It's my pleasure to be here tonight to talk about updated methodologies for the city's traffic mitigation and road impact fees. We have, as the city manager mentioned, the current fees for both of these, they're two separate fees, but they were both adopted in 1994, and neither have been updated since that time. The idea of mitigation fees is to help the city to collect a fair share of the costs of providing facilities to serve new development, and also to recover and to refurbish facilities that are impacted by new development as it occurs. This is the first fee, as I mentioned, this is the first fee study that has been done for either of these fees since 1994. So we started off looking at a fee schedule that was quite old. The fee basis for the traffic mitigation fee, that's the first one that I'm going to cover. The current one, the fee applies to all different types of development, and it's broken down into categories. The current fee is based on average daily trips. Average daily trips are counted over a 24-hour period, and they're not considered to be, by traffic engineers, the best method of determining capacity needs. We've used, for our updated methodology, a peak hour trip, which is a measure of the number of trips that occur during the peak afternoon hours of the day. Those are generally considered to be the best measures because that's when you have the most traffic on the road. As the city manager mentioned, this is emerging best practice. This is a type of methodology that's being adopted by cities more and more as they move to update these fees. And as I mentioned, it's the best determinant of impact on the need for the road system. The suggestion in the fee schedule is that the fee increases be phased in over 6 years. As the city manager mentioned, there's no requested action tonight to phase in the fee, to actually adopt the fees, but we have developed a phase-in schedule for phasing in the fee over a period of years. Let me talk a little bit about the fee structure. The fee structure, it would actually reduce fees for some types of development and increase fees for other types of development. The current methodology that is in place for the city now, and this is covered more in the staff report, is that fees are charged, average daily trips are charged $600 per trip for the first 10 trips. Most types of residential development have fewer than 10 average daily trips. So most types of residential development are paying $600 a trip for all of the trips. Most land uses above that are paying a fee of $60 per trip. The fee is $600 per trip for the first 10, and then for anything above that, it's $60 per trip. So they're paying 10% of that per trip cost. So types of development that generate a lot of traffic get a break, the way this fee structure is right now. In the proposed structure that we have set up, we haven't provided any kind of a discount in the fee per trip. It's based on the number of trips generated, and there is no discount included in the methodology. The council could make a policy decision to do that, as has occurred in the past.
Go ahead.
Thank you. I was writing, did you say that the more trips, the lower the cost?
Yes.
You did. Thank you very much. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
That's the first type of fee, and this is the fee that is designed to capture the costs of generated by new trips and new traffic that is put on roads as development occurs. The second type of fee that the city has that we have got an update for is to capture the costs of direct costs of construction impacts on the road system. The city does have what is currently called a roads impact fee. We are recommending that the name be changed to construction activities impact fee because that's more reflective of what it's actually based on. The current fee is, these fees are designed not to construct new roads, but to refurbish the costs of the impacts of construction vehicles on the road system. So they both are related to making improvements to the roads, but they have two different purposes. The fee basis is currently based on the weight of heavy vehicles. At least that's the way that it's designed. There's a charge and a schedule that's designed to be based on the weight of the vehicles. The proposed fee is based on the cost of road deterioration and new development. We found that we had a number of studies, or several studies that had been done jointly that had been funded by the cities of Los Gatos, Saratoga, Montessorino, and Campbell that were done by a consulting firm called CSG Engineering in the last couple of years. And they were looking at the impacts and the costs that were being created by heavy load vehicles on the roads, and specifically identified costs of construction vehicles and construction impacts on the road system. So we used those studies as the basis for developing the fee structures. We developed some options based on which cities were included in the mix. The proposed fees would be, they would start out at $1 per square foot for residential and non-residential, and that would increase by 50 cents per year over the next 2 years until they reach $2 per square foot. The fee range that we had identified in our report was that there was a low end of $1.41 per square foot and a high end of $2.39 per square foot. The mid-range of that was between $1.99 and $2.28 per square foot. So the fee schedule that was recommended would put the city in that mid-range. The other thing that the proposed fee schedule does is, right now there is a cubic yard charge for landscape grading and encroachment permits, and that would be dropped and replaced with a straight per square foot charge for new square feet of development that occurs. And with that, I'd be pleased to answer any.
Madam Mayor, if I may jump in, one comment I left off my opening remarks is the second fee, what we're now calling the construction activities mitigation fee. It is comparable to what the council has previously approved through the solid waste JPA for solid waste vehicles, which is the original genesis of the study that led to this work. To make it real and tangible is using the $1 level and the average annual square feet that we have in residential and non-residential construction. It would lead to about $375K that would be allocated through the CIP for maintaining and repairing our streets due to the impacts of heavy vehicles through construction, leading to a disproportionate share of the deterioration of the streets. So it does create that ongoing funding stream to pay for slurry sealing, reconstruction, or whatever is necessary to keep our PCI, our pavement condition index, rising rather than dropping.
Mr. Larson, given your preliminary remarks when we started this item about really not expecting us to do anything with it tonight, then it would be coming back in a couple of months, what specifically do you need or want from council tonight to move this item along?
Two things. One, some indication that staff should continue to work on this and bring it back to you to correct the deficiency of the last 16 years of not having any increase. If the council has no interest in either of these changes, we have plenty of other work to do with fewer staff resources, and I'd prefer not to bring it back if you're not willing to consider it. Otherwise, if you have particular questions or additional information you'd like us to bring back, that would be most helpful to know at this time so that we can be responsive to your interests when we bring it back.
Okay. Should we just start? Mr. Wasserman, you want to start?
Thank you, I do, and I've got a question for Mr. Gaynor. Thank you. Mr. Gaynor, page 3 of the staff report, I just wanted to understand two things. One, in the middle paragraph, it talks about council considering phasing in the increased fee for commercial land use, yada, yada, over a period of 6 years. And I look down below in the box, the matrix you have for traffic impact, and I look, for instance, at the first one, supermarket current fees $461, adjusted mitigation fee, it says year 1, $659. Now, the paragraph above says the total increase each year will be 1/6 of the difference. This phasing will allow council to accelerate or delay. The table below reflects this proposed scenario. And I can't believe, maybe I'm wrong, but I can't believe where you're phasing in over 6 years and the first year goes from 460 to 659.
Yes, sir. The reason for that is, and this would be $198,000 is 1/6 of the increase. The reason for that is that for a supermarket, the number of trips that it generates is 11.85 per 1,000 square feet.
Okay, so if I cut to the chase, being a numbers person like yourself,
Right.
you're saying if we were to jump to it in one move, it'd be 1.6 million?
That's correct.
So I'm doing the math right.
That's correct.
200,000 per year for 6 years.
Right now, most...
No, that's 1.2, Mr. Rice, on top of the 460.
Right.
So suggesting going to 460 to 1.6
That's correct.
million.
And the reason for that is that right now, most of those trips are only charged at $60 rather than the methodology that was used to develop the cost per trip in the current methodology was that a trip cost $600.
Okay, so in what you're saying, a 40,000 square foot supermarket would have traffic impact mitigation of $1.6 million, which would be $40 a square foot for traffic mitigation.
That's correct.
In their building costs.
That's correct.
Okay, that's one question. May I have a second question?
Yes.
Thank you. And it ties back into what I asked for clarification before, and you mentioned $600 a trip for the first 10 trips and $60 a trip after that. I look at general offices having far fewer trips than supermarket. Okay, for instance, I look at the cost per square foot of the current mitigation, general offices $120,000, using your 20,000 square foot example, which is about $6 a square foot, and I see supermarkets at 10. What am I missing there?
Well,
what's the cost per square foot higher on a use that has more volume?
One of the things that is different is that the peak hour, there isn't a direct correlation between the peak hour trips and the average daily trips in the numbers. In other words, for a general office building,
yes,
peak hour generation is 1.29 trips. For a general office building under ADT, and I don't have the number with me, but I believe it's something like 12 or 13 trips. So there's a big variation between those two. It's about 13 or 14 times. Some of these numbers can be 15, 16, even 20 times higher if you're looking at ADT versus the peak hour numbers. The reason being that And the numbers that generate the peak hour trips are the types of land uses where people go to those facilities on their way home from work. A supermarket is going to be one that a lot of people will go to on the way home from work, so it's going to have a much higher generation at that time of the day, the peak hour, than it would be if you took a 24-hour period.
Okay, and that helps me understand what was my initial appearance of a contradiction when I looked at fast food restaurants currently at $35 a foot versus office at $6 a foot. And I'm saying, wait a minute, office has fewer trips, which is charged at a higher average rate, so how did that come to be?
And that's the reason, is that you have the...
Okay. But on the supermarket one as an example, with the proposed mitigation, if it was all done at one time instead of 6 years, that would put in $40 a foot construction costs.
That's correct.
Thank you.
Mr. Wasserman, did you have any comments to give? I just thought we would go down the line here to Mr. Larson in terms of responding to what he's looking for going forward. Are you interested in pursuing either or both of these? Do you want more information when it comes back to us, or do you want to stop this dead right now?
I had my questions, and I'm digesting what he said, and I'm really not prepared to give you an intelligent answer.
All right, then we won't go down the line. We'll just wait and see whenever someone's inspired to speak. And that would be Mr. Rice.
I can go down.
Okay.
So I read this differently, and when I listened to the testimony, now I'm halfway between saying this is about as big a business killer as I can imagine right off the bat, and oh my God, are we that seriously undercharging for the impacts of the development? So I'm stuck in between, and I am not ready to kill this because I think we must have an issue. We do have an issue here, but I've got to spend a lot more time and thought on this before I can give a really cogent answer of where I want to take it. I'm not sure that's very helpful. I apologize.
That's all right. We may circle back to you. Anyone on this side want to speak? Vice Mayor.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Well, we have to do something. If you look at the top of page 5, the statement reads, the estimated total annual cost of roadway deterioration in Los Gatos due to all types of vehicle activity is $2.6 million, of which an estimated $1.5 million is due to load-related stress. And we have said all along that we have to find another revenue stream for our road infrastructure. Now, we've done a good job, thanks to the people with the little red envelope and others, to keep on top of this. But as you mentioned, Mr. Manager, our PCI needs to be sustained, and if we drop below where we are now, it just escalates in terms of future expenditures. That to me is a driver behind, so to speak, behind this issue. I don't know if this moves towards solution. I think we still have to, as we indicated when we were together on the retreat, we still have to look for that additional revenue source wherever we may find it in a way that is appropriate and acceptable. However, when I look at the projections for, well, as was discussed by Councilman Wasserman, the tremendous increases for a supermarket coming online. Not that we're going to have a whole bunch of supermarkets coming online. We have one, and it probably will fill the space that we need for this particular service for a long time into the future. But those numbers do seem very significant when you project them over that period of time. And I wonder if we need to take the methodology and take another look, because in some measure It does sound similar to things we've heard in other jurisdictions where there would be an imposition of a surcharge on auto sales, for example, in a particular county. And that's always been rejected because the response is, well, then if that's what Santa Clara County is going to charge, then we just go to San Mateo County and get our cars. And so the consequence would be a diminished, ability to have that service, and then at the same time, as that service is less and less subscribed to, the revenue that could be generated from that service then will come back to haunt the jurisdiction that put that fee or surcharge in place. And that would be my concern here, is that the methodology sounds very analytical and built on strong best practices at this point, but the message, the global message is that we are no longer interested in your business. I think that would be the thing that would concern me most. And if our businesses, if new businesses, because we do have some opportunities on the boulevard to create new businesses, and if this is the starting point for a potential business when they're looking to take some of our vacancies right now that are costing us by being vacant, take them out of the mix, because they can go to Campbell. I don't know if Campbell's fee structure is any different, but go to a neighboring community, take that business with them, then I think we have to look very carefully at this before we move ahead. So that would be my caution. And I don't question the need. I just wonder if the methodology makes sense in kind of the more global perspective of doing business in our community.
No? Yes, no, yes, no? Mrs. Becker? Thank you. I agree with Mr. Rice. I'm not ready to throw this out. I think there is a need here. But there's conflicting input, and I have a conflicted reaction to that input. The new study, the new methodology, peak hour trips versus average daily trips, that has a logic to it. Am I prepared right now at this second to totally buy into it? I don't know, but I know that there is a logic to it. I can appreciate the fact that we need to have funding to maintain our roadways, but am I prepared to use the peak hour trips and the impact they have on development to be the funding source? No, but the answer is no, but. And then, do I think that adding the cost are going to drive everybody from Los Gatos Boulevard to Campbell? No. But do I think it might have an impact? Possibly. So one more time, I think I'll be looking to staff for additional information. But actually, with some exceptions on this one, this staff report and this application, or this concept, it is not as troubling to me, and maybe in part it's because we haven't done an analysis and an update since the 1990s.
If we break this into two parts, the road impact fee, I have very little difficulty with. I think it is something that we already do. It is clearly an impact on the community that doesn't need to be there except as a result of the construction. The proposed fee does not seem to me to be too big of a penalty, and it would be something that could be afforded by developers, whether it's residential or commercial. So I am totally in favor of moving ahead with that and continuing the discussion on that whenever we bring this back again. The traffic impact I have a lot more concerns about, not because of the new methodology, but because of the way the math works out, as Mr. Wasserman was quickly doing down here. And I'm not sure, I had some problems absorbing the staff report, and so I'm not sure I'm reading it correctly, but if you look on attachment 3, which appears to be the list of proposed mitigation fees, and I see on the left a list of uses of things that we would really like to have in our community and that we really need in our community, like a daycare center, for example. And I see a number of $75,614.53. And I'm thinking, if I'm reading that right, that that is a lot of money for somebody who wants to open a daycare center. Now, true, there is traffic going back and forth with the daycare center, but that is a business that does not have to be in this town. It could be in another community, which wouldn't necessarily impact our sales tax revenue, but it sure is going to be an inconvenience to our residents. I have, and we don't need to go into it now, but when we talk about this again, I'm not quite understanding on like expansion of the schools, and we do have school districts that are planning to or hoping to expand classrooms, and we start looking at how much per student assisted living. This is a senior service that we need more of in town, $2,065 per bed. That's going to keep some people from going into that business or expanding. The church, I have questions on how we calculate that and apply that, because I'm always concerned about, I forget what it is, Executive Order 1600, something like that, that really restricts the ability of municipalities to have constraints on what our faith community is doing on their land. I'm looking over here back on page 3 of the staff report, a new sit-down restaurant, which again is something that we would like to see, especially perhaps out on the boulevard, and a $33,000 increase in year 1. They're not going to come in, and we do need more than one grocery store, I think. So I'm very concerned about this, so I am open to continuing to explore it, but I think we need to do more exploration, as the Vice Mayor was discussing, about unintended consequences, and I need more clarification. Bring this down a notch in simplicity to understanding attachment 3 and all of the tables in here, so that we truly, and the community, as they become aware of this, truly understand what we are considering and what the impacts are going to be on residents and on businesses. Mr. Wasserman?
Thank you. A quick question for you, if I may, Mr. Gaynor. The fast food restaurant numbers, if I'm doing it right, when you take the cost difference times 6 years, added on to the current mitigation fee, it would come out at close to $300,000.
That's correct.
For a 2,500 square foot fast food. So if a burger place wanted to move in, for instance, given this, their cost for this would be over $100 a square foot.
That's correct.
Okay. Okay, thank you. Then I share the concerns, Madam Mayor, that you just expressed.
Thank you. Council, do we have anything else we want to say to staff, or as staff, Mr. Rice?
I think just this, to reiterate the same kind of comparisons as we were talking about on the previous item about what surrounding communities are where they are today and where they're headed. Because, yeah, $100 a square foot could certainly discourage somebody from locating in Los Gatos.
Mr. Larson, what else do you need from us?
This is helpful. Jenny and I just talked that we don't have the comparison with other jurisdictions, so we can certainly do that on traffic impact fees. Not sure it's needed on the construction impact fees, just based on the council comment, but if it's easy to obtain while we're getting the other information, we will do so. I do want to highlight for the council that you control both the numerator and the denominator on this one, which makes it easier for you to adjust, in that all of the costs are driven really from attachment 4, which are the construction, the traffic improvements that a staff has identified that will be need to funded at some point in time. If that basis of 26 million was dropped to 20 million, you've just lowered the costs for all the development categories by 25%. So we have a lot more flexibility controlling both the numerator and the denominator on the traffic impact fees, if that's helpful. The other issue, the attorney and I were having a side conversation, is what is the council's discretion to selectively apply the fees, and we'll be asking the consultants as well, using different ratios for different land use categories. So might it be possible to apply a different analytical model for a child care or preschool versus whatever? I will tell you, just being relatively new here, only 2 years and working with your budget, the impact fees charged by the town of Los Gatos particularly on residential development are relatively low. There's not a school impact fee. There's not a park impact fee. The traffic impact fee is relatively modest. And I think if we did a comprehensive impact fee analysis with other communities, you'd find that we're not a high fee jurisdiction, but let's get the data to analyze that hypothesis.
Vice Mayor?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. And since you referenced attachment 4, Mr. Manager, I do have some comments about this, because this projection of a laundry list of road widening projects, primarily road widening projects, with estimated total project cost, estimated fee eligibility. It says that we have in the pipeline theoretically 27 million and change, and if we were to build these out, and the mitigation impact fee would bring 26 and change, so it's almost a wash. But my question is, well, there are two questions. One is, this list of projections for purpose of traffic mitigation is, I think, a list that needs to be evaluated, because it probably reflects a time before any of us were around of how we were assuming traffic would move and develop in the community. And if you notice, everything is widening. So Los Gatos Boulevard from Samaritan to Camino del Sol. If you look at that section, it would be on the east side, because the west side's already widened. On the east side, there are a number of individual properties that intrude into what would be that widened space. And then there are other developments that are already in place where the widening has taken place. And I assume that the cost to the developer to widen those specific parts of the boulevard, that cost was borne by the developer, that it wasn't a cost borne by the town. So that when you're doing that widening, that actually the reason why it's not widened entirely is because we are waiting for developments to take place. So in that regard, that 1.75 million, just for that section alone, probably would not fall on our shoulders, but would be part of the development costs at that time. And as you look through each of these, I think that's probably an issue that could be replicated as you go down that list, that we're waiting for developments to take place, and that's why you've got this kind of patchwork of built-out streets with then intruding, non-improved properties. that might change that number base for us significantly if we were to actually look at development to take place in many of those areas. And if each of us kind of looked at that list, I'm sure we'd easily see where developments are primed to take place. Second question is whether we want to do this now or not, whether this is at this moment in time in a kind of a revised and evolving awareness of complete streets which access for pedestrians and bicyclists as well as automobiles, and an intention to use those streets to reduce speeds rather than increase speeds, whether or not some of these should be revisited in our laundry list at this time, at a convenient time. We don't have the money to pay for any of these, so, it's time to take a look and see how many of these improvements we really feel are improvements now, given this moment in our history of traffic mitigations, to see whether or not some of these can actually be removed from the list, or that we can look at some of the streets that we're calling out for widening, where we may not want to widen. We actually may want to narrow for purposes of new orientation towards more complete streets. So I'm glad this is on the sheet. I would certainly like to see staff's comment to an awful lot of these, but again, I don't think, given the way this is projected, that this cost would fall on our shoulders. It would fall on the shoulders of the developers, and then the improvement districts that we would promote, as we have, I think, on the boulevard. I think the Gateway Boulevard project included some traffic mitigation fees for projected future development of that roadway. So I bring that to the council's attention as an evolving rather than a fixed list of projects, and the fees would possibly change depending upon the developments that would take place there.
Mr. Martello, do we need a motion to continue this, or it's not really a continuation?
I think you would if we're going to continue it to a date certain, otherwise you would not, and I think this is going to come back when the calendar allows it.
Correct. We have not, excuse me, Mayor, we have not selected a date. I think the earliest it could possibly be would be June, and June 7th is already quite full. I worry the 21st will be equally full since it's the last meeting prior to recess. And then August is taken up with general plan. So I could see breaking this into two issues, possibly the construction impact fee coming back separately, and then the bigger traffic mitigation fee probably taking more time and likely after council recess. So I would not recommend setting it to a time certain because I can't give you a date. And we'll just renotice as appropriate.
Therefore, we don't need a motion, and we can finish up this item, except Mr. Wasserman has something to say.
Thank you. I just would like to ask, Madam Mayor, if staff, when it does come back to us, since that traffic impact mitigation fee is based on square footage and use, if we can have another column in there, because when I looked at adjusted mitigation fee year one cost difference, I looked at that, and then in reading in more depth, I realized you got to take that number times 6 and add it on. It would be helpful to me if we could have one more column, because we say cost difference, for instance, under supermarket of 198, and the cost difference is 198 per year.
If the council proceeds with the subsequent year increase.
Right. That would help me understand it better. Thank you.
Thank you, and thank you, Mr. Gaynor. I hope you didn't feel like we shot the messenger here a little bit. We were just a little stunned by these numbers. Thank you. So that item is concluded as far as I'm concerned, and we can go on to our third public hearing, which is item number 14. And this is to approve, consider a proposed annual maintenance rate increase for Landscape and Lighting Assessment District 1, Hillbrook Benefit Zone. And we will begin with a staff report by Kevin Rouhani.
Madam Mayor, members of the council, back in May 1994, as a number of residents of the Hillbrook Drive subdivision approached the town to the council and requested formation of the Hillbrook Drive benefit zone to be included as a part of the town's lighting and landscape district. Town council at that time approved and proceeded with the formation of the benefit zone for the Hillbrook Drive subdivision. The purpose of this was to provide enhanced landscaping and maintenance support for a parcel of land which is at the entrance to the Hillbrook Drive subdivision at the corner of Blossom Hill and Hillbrook Drive. This is the largest parcel of land in the subdivision. The property belongs to the Santa Clara Valley Water District. Town of Los Gatos has a lease agreement with the district for usage and maintenance. The enhanced landscaping that the town through our contract provides for a number of lighting and landscape district areas throughout the town. For this particular area provides enhanced turf and mowing and maintenance, irrigation, lighting, tree maintenance, and cleanup and overall maintenance of that corner property, which operates kind of like a small neighborhood park, a private park for that subdivision. At the time of inception, an annual assessment of $50 per parcel. It's an annual fee, $50 per parcel, and there are 34 parcels that are within that zone, within that benefit zone. Was established to cover the expenditures. There was some fund balance in that benefit zone at the time of formations, and over time, over the past 16 years, since 1994 up to now, there has not been any increase to that $50 per parcel annual fee. As the cost of services, cost of utilities, just cost of maintenance has gone up, again, there's been an imbalance, and bringing us to our current fiscal year, 2009-10, which by the end of June of this year, we would have a balance of about $500 left in that benefit zone account. For us to be able to continue to operate and maintain and provide generally the same level of service to that benefit zone, we would have to increase our cost, our assessment per property. And based on our work that staff has done, that cost would become $175 per year per parcel, so from 50 to 175. The town provided information to all of the property owners within this benefit zone, informing them of the proposed cost increase, the rationale for it, also informing them about this evening's meeting, opportunity for the public hearing, to have input, if there are any objections, discussions, certainly that the council could hear from the property owners. For the town to make a decision as far as dissolving or continuing with this assessment district on this benefit zone, there must be a minimum of 50% opposition or protest. There are 34 parcels, there should be 17. As of this evening, I believe we have received 7 letters in opposition to the increasing of the cost in the benefit zone. So, in summary, what is in front of you, after the public hearing and receiving public input, are the options of, as the staff recommends, increasing the assessment from $50 per year, which hasn't been changed for the past 16 years, to $175 per parcel per year. So there would be funds available for the town to continue the operations of the benefit zone, and everything will be as it is. And basically, that would basically cover the cost of our landscaping contractor, PG&E bill, water bill, and other miscellaneous services. And these costs and services are identical to other benefit zones that the town operates throughout the town. We have a number of similar lighting and landscape districts. If that's the, excuse me, if that is the decision of the council, and it is approved that the assessment will be increased, the staff is more than willing to sit down with the property owners and residents of the neighborhood, work with them if they have specific issues as far as the overall scope of work, the look and feel of that benefit zone, things that we could do differently in terms of cost savings, in terms of the services. It is a fairly defined, and the services are, well established. There's been some discussion by some of the property owners of let's do more of this, less of that, and those discussions certainly we could continue with them, and we will reach a kind of consensus, and if there's any adjustments to the fees going to be done, we'll bring it back to the council for any future adjustments. But if we don't do anything, basically, we could not operate this lighting and landscape district as of end of this fiscal year in about 3 months. Alternatively, if the decision is made not to proceed with increasing the annual assessment, our other option, staff recommends that this benefit zone be dissolved, and the town terminate the lease agreement that we have with the water district. The Santa Clara Valley Water District, the staff has talked to them. They have no desire to maintain that parcel of property, certainly to the condition it is in park-like settings today. So basically the town will get out of that lighting and landscape business in that neighborhood. This concludes staff report. I'll be happy to answer your questions now or after the public hearing.
Thank you, Mr. Ohani. Questions for Mr. Ohani? I would start down this way. Well, okay, Mr. Wasserman.
Thank you. Mr. Rouhani, is it your understanding if the town were to dissolve it, that the water company would be open to having, as you mentioned, the property owners would be free to form their own organization or association? Is your understanding that water district would be open to that happening?
I have not had a discussion with the water district whether they would entertain the same arrangement I have with the town with, let's say, an entity of property owners. Perhaps I can answer that. Generally, again, maybe some council members are more familiar with that, but generally water district deals in this type of things with municipalities. So unless the association form an HOA and want to have an agreement with the water district, certainly that discussion can be had, but I'm not aware of it right now.
But certainly there's nothing definite there.
No.
Thank you.
The agreement currently is just between us and the water district.
Mrs. Spector?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I had a question for staff. I think it's been answered, but just let me ask it. Although the issues raised in the residents' letter with regard to the type of landscaping, lawns, the watering necessary, might be deemed tangentially related to the issue before us, I think what I hear you saying is should the district continue, that staff would be amenable to meeting with the residents to discuss this watering, lawn, alternate landscaping issues. Is that correct?
Absolutely. Again, we'll be more than happy to. Right now, again, it is a kind of a park-type settings. If there is, we'll meet with the neighborhood. If there's consensus that they like a different look and feel, we can work with them and price it, and that would impact the level of maintenance, both long-term and upfront, to change to whatever is the wishes of the community.
Thank you. Mr. Larson?
And to be even more explicit, what I've talked with the Parks and Public Works Department is that the new fee level would then be maintained for any changes in terms of the landscaping, irrigation systems, whatever, and then once that improvement was paid off, any town investment in that improvement, we would then come back with a reduced fee that reflects the new ongoing maintenance cost for that parcel.
Other questions of staff? I'll go ahead and open the public hearing. I'll begin by asking the clerk administrator to formally report on how many protests we have received.
Okay, there are 7 protests which are in your staff report, and we have no new protests received tonight or any other time.
And we have 1 card, a very patient Dale Workman. And if you would like to come and speak, you have up to 3 minutes.
Mr. Mayor, Ms. Mayor and Council,
I live on Fairmead Lane, and have talked to all the residents on Fairmead Lane, which are 13, well, there's 12. One is somebody that's leasing, so that's, I haven't talked to the owner who's not there. A couple of questions. One, why, when is the town leasing something that belongs to the flood control district? The flood control district runs behind my particular house. They come in and maintain it. It goes underground through an access to Hillbrook, a drive that actually is for the park and park maintenance, crosses Hillbrook, turns right, and goes under this piece of property. So that's one question, is why that arrangement. I was not aware of when that arrangement was made or why it was made. A house directly across the street from that is not in the district, and I mean they're right on Hillbrook, so that's another issue. There's a parity issue in the fact that across Blossom Hill Road there's a strip of land that is, being maintained and is not part of an assessment district. So there's a parity issue. And we look at the costs, and the costs associated for the landscape contractor is $3,110. That's estimated actually for this year and estimated for next year. That's about $260 a month. The lawn area is roughly about 4,700 square feet. That's a lot of money. We have, one of the neighbors has an area of about 3,100 square feet. They're paying $100 a month. So you're looking at $1,200 versus $3,100. Yes, it's a third bigger, but they're paying two-thirds less. So I don't know how the town is arranged with this landscape contractor, but he's making a lot of money, because you don't, when it rains, you don't mow, and it's not mowed every week. So that, normally landscape people will come in, and if they don't service you that week, they don't charge for it. So I think we are not being diligent as a town in monitoring that, and we are getting, there's a fee here for town administrative charges of $250. The other thing is watering, excuse me, $1,300 a year in watering, and the watering is over excessive. It runs off through, there's a little gravel park, walkway into the gutters, so it's not being looked at. And there is no lighting. We're paying $400 a year for maintaining a sprinkler control valve, which is ridiculous. So I think that totally the costs associated. Now we have come back and proposed, I mean, it's in a couple of the letters I'm aware of, that it does get re-landscaped into native shrub. Nobody uses the lawn. The park is not more than 150 feet from Hillbrook, this area right here. So the point would be to, let the people use the park and just put it into native thing that doesn't require watering.
Thank you.
Eliminate the watering.
Let's see if council has any questions for you. Mr. Wasserman?
Thank you, Mr. Workman. Any thoughts on, it looks like 27 out of 34 people in the district did not protest.
Most of them, I guess, just are too busy or too, lose track of it, because this notice came out a couple months ago and may have lost track of it and not committed. I've talked to the 12 of the 13 residents on Fairmead, and every one of them is against it. Now, they did not enter protest letters, I know. But
okay, thank you.
Okay.
Thank you. We're out of people here, so I'm guessing that there is no one else who wishes to speak on this item. So we will go ahead and close the public hearing. We've had no new protests come in during the last few minutes. I will ask staff if they can answer a couple of the questions that were raised by Mr. Workman on how this whole thing came about, the other side of Blossom Hill, and a brief explanation of the cost differential between public services versus my gardening service.
Sure. Madam Mayor, maybe I answer the last question first. Any of the contracts that the town has, being a public agency, whether it be a consultant contract, construction contract, we go through a bidding process. We always, every few years, we renew our contracts, get new bids. In fact, for all of our lighting and landscape district, we are just finished getting new bids for the maintenance. These are very specific, the scope from mowing, tree trimming, light maintenance, and whole gamut of services. So we just renewed our contract, well, not renewed, but got new bids, and our bid for the Hillbrook assessment, if I'm not mistaken, was about $3,400-3,500. So each of the districts, our total district, we have 6 of them, and the overall cost for all of them is about mid-$20,000 range. So we go through a very competitive process. We get bids from contractors. Now, I understand maybe a contractor working for a private residence certainly doesn't have to adhere to a lot of requirements working for a municipality, so the price automatically goes up, insurance, bonds, and some of the other requirements, versus if a contract works directly for a private residence. So that's on the cost factor, but we do, competitively price all of our services. On the question of that additional parcel of property on the other side of Blossom Hill Road, I know that we have a area next to the Ross Creek that the town maintains. Each of the assessment districts, the lighting and landscape district that the town of Los Gatos maintains over the years, they were all initiated and requested by the property owners whom they wanted enhanced level of maintenance. We have them throughout the town, which again, they just, because of the uniqueness of neighborhood throughout the town, they want enhanced landscaping. So it's initiated by the property owners or neighborhoods. The town doesn't go and forces people that, let's form an assessment district. So that's on, hopefully that answered that question.
Okay.
Well, and the other question with respect to, I think there was a question about how did this come about with the water district. Probably Mr. Rahani's answer to the other question answered that, and that is that, yes, the homeowners association or the group of homeowners is probably free to try to contract directly with the water district, but they would probably want an association. They would want insurance from the association. That's probably how the town got involved, because there isn't that entity, number one. And then secondly, just like in our contracts, they'll want to make sure you not only have general liability, but also, and the big dollar one is sometimes workers' comp insurance. So that's probably the history. We're speculating a little bit, but that's, in past circumstances, the water district does not necessarily want to maintain property like that to the level that this is maintained.
Mr. Rahani?
Madam Mayor, also the easements that and the lease agreements that the town has with the water district, in order for us to access kind of this backside of Blossom Hill Park for all of our service vehicles, we have to go through water district property. So that's why this agreement was initiated. I cannot answer why this particular parcel was included as a part of that lease agreement. I can, again, only speculate at that time whenever, there was a request by the residences to have enhanced landscaping, this was added to that lease agreement.
Thank you. Council, comments, questions, motions? Mr. Rice?
I actually lived on Fairmead for a couple of years and know a number of people in that area, and I'm comfortable that with the path that I hear staff taking of being willing to meet with them, make changes if necessary, and we'll see this again for changes that may come down the road. So I'm going to go ahead and make a motion to adopt the resolution in attachment 1 approving the proposed annual maintenance rate increase for Landscape and Lighting Assessment District 1, Hillbrook Benefit Zone, to the $175 annual fee effective July 1, 2010.
Second.
Further discussion? I can support this with the understanding that staff will pursue with the neighborhood the alternatives. I thought there were some great suggestions in the letters of protest. Of course, what we don't know is how many of the other folks like it exactly the way it is and don't want to change. So doing your usual great job on community outreach and discussion, I think, to figure out what it is that really is appropriate for those folks, and trying to bring those costs back down in the future would be a good thing. So we'll go ahead and call for the question. Mr. Wasserman?
Thank you, and I think it's worthwhile supporting as well, and I appreciate what Mr. Workman said about the amount of time that's gone by. But the fact is, we sent out the letters, and 17 out of 24 people didn't oppose it, and being the democracy that we are, I think that says something too.
Call for the question. All in favor?
Aye.
And it passes unanimously. Thank you very much. We have our final agenda item for this evening under other business, and this is a follow-up on the council retreat that was held on February 20th. And Ms. Jacobs is going to, or Mr. Larson?
We actually chatted for a minute. We can either answer questions, or Ms. Jacobs can go ahead and present the changes. We do have one alternative wording we wanted to present under the arts item on civic engagement for your consideration, civic enrichment, excuse me. So Ms. Jacobs can present the changes that are highlighted in green, or we can respond to questions.
Council, if you're comfortable with this, I actually don't need her to review everything that's in green. I think we've all read it. So if we could just focus perhaps on the issues or questions that staff has highlighted, and then see if council has any comments on anything else that would be an efficient use of time. So if staff wants to run through those specific questions or concerns that you have.
There's only one that's come forward from council, and I'll just jump right in. It's the last box under the civic enrichment column, which is the 5th column. Currently, it says restructure community arts and culture programs and services to optimize cost-effective services. While cost-effective services is always part of staff's goal and all of the work we bring you, we know there's other benefits to arts and culture besides cost-effectiveness. So we've modified that to be restructure and refocus arts and culture programs and services to meet community priorities and needs. And that would be our recommended wording change, which you can either trust we'll put it in, or I'll read it again so you can write it in.
And I might mention as well, the other issue that we would like council discussion and input on is the downtown parking strategic goal, to get some clarification as to what actions the council would like us to pursue with that goal.
And council, remember that one was identified when we did a little vote on each of us identifying 3 issues that we thought should be tackled, and that one got, I believe, if I remember right, 3 votes, which raised it up to the level, but there was no discussion or description as to what that actually meant. So let's see if anyone on council wants to talk about that, and or comments on any of the other draft items that are before us. Mr. Rice?
With regards to the downtown parking, I think a specific action is to have the Parking and Transportation Commission reach out to the downtown community with regards to the potential for continuing the current assessment district for the funding of an additional parking structure.
Council, other comments on that, other thoughts regarding this?
Madam Mayor, to broaden the language as we have in most of the goals from what you discussed at the retreat, an alternative way to frame that creates other possibilities would be to explore additional mechanisms to increase the availability and usability of downtown parking to meet the business needs, of which the VIA Improvement District might be one of those solutions.
I leave the wordsmithing to the experts.
Well, and it actually opens up the other possibilities, because there were,
Absolutely.
back in the old KEKU report, remember, Joe?
Yeah, I do.
Yeah, there were some other options that have not been implemented that kind of got pushed for various reasons, very good reasons not to do at that particular point. So that's probably a good idea to be flexible. Vice Mayor.
Yes, if I could comment to Councilman Rice's framing of that issue. I do believe that the rephrase that was offered by the assistant manager more broadly captures what it is that we were talking about, because I think if you ask the downtown merchants, they would say, yes, build another parking structure. Okay, but I'm thoroughly convinced that the additional recommendations made in the KEKU report way back when called for our maximizing the use of the resource, and by so doing, we would gain additional parking without additional major expenses. And a lot of that had to do with how we structured the flex time for parking, the parking availability for employees and so forth. So I wouldn't be going to the parking structure as the primary focus on that. I think the more broad point of view would be really good. And by the way, it's so cozy in here tonight, don't you think?
Other comments from council? We did all the work in February, is that what we're saying? Okay. So, do we need a motion to approve or adopt this? I don't know if we need one. I would feel more comfortable, because this identifies the core values of the town of Los Gatos and strategic goals for 2010 through 2012. It'll be the framework for decision-making and work plans going forward, and it's going to be what we're going to be talking about as the framework as we talk about budget or plans for next year or state of the town or lots of other things coming up in the next few weeks and months. So now's the time if you have anything to say, or a motion to adopt.
Madam Mayor, if I might, I will move to adopt the document as an appropriate and accurate reflection of the council's retreat of February 20.
Second.
Further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Motion carries.
And implicit is the two changes that were discussed during the meeting.
Correct.
Yes. And we are out of agenda items, and therefore we are adjourned.
Madam Mayor, if I just may say, thank you. I just wanted to give advance notice to council, based on our prior discussion, that it's likely I won't be here April 19th.
Thank you.
Just wanted to disclose that.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. We are adjourned.